The smaller aviators don't measure up to the height indicator on the seat. Just put the belt through the loop in the center strap before buckling.
Walt Disney was a dreamer and a doer, a man who cared about the world and its problems.
Let's have some fun creating the future, shall we?
Nemo, where are you, son? Nemo? No, not again!
Emergency here! All cars to the high security teleportation chamber immediately!
That means you, recruits. Now move it!
WDW Radio, your information station.
Hello and welcome to the WDW Radio Show, your Walt Disney World information station. I am your host, Lou Mangello, and this is show number 97 for the week of December 14th, 2008. This week, we're going to explore in detail not one, but two of Walt Disney World's most well-themed resorts as we take an in-depth look at Disney's Port Orleans, Riverside, and French Quarter resorts. Joining me from merry old England is Andre Willie, creator of one of the most in-depth online resources about the resorts. Together, we'll discover and help you learn more about not just the rooms, amenities, and ways to get the most out of your time there, but the incredibly detailed, Imagineered backstory and interesting history of these properties. It's a fun, informative look at two resorts that offer two unique experiences and lots of wonderful time outside the parks. I'll play some more of your voicemails at the end of the show, so sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of the WDW Radio Show. One of the most wonderful things about Walt Disney World are the almost limitless choices it presents to you, whether it's what to ride or what to eat, and obviously that didn't take long to start getting to food, and of course, where to stay. And over the years, Walt Disney World has grown from two luxury hotels into a true resort destination with something for every taste and every budget. And they really created and defined what themed resorts are today, having pioneered that model beginning with their designs in the late 60s. And now today, we have about 24 resorts to choose from the sophisticated elegance of the Grand Floridian to the whimsical fun and charm of Pop Century and everything in between. And the variety of resorts afford people not only the ability to choose based on price and value, but theme as well. And two of the very best themed resorts, and often values, are actually sister resorts, as they both operate under the Port Orleans name. And of course, I'm talking about Disney's Port Orleans, Riverside, and French Quarter resorts. And today, we're going to explore their history, their services, their amenities, their rooms, their benefits, and so much more, including some tips and tricks on how to get the best experience out of your stay there. And joining me this week from across the pond, as they say, thank God for great technology, is Andre Willie. He is the creator of PortOrleans.org, an unofficial website dedicated to what I have to believe is his favorite resort on property, which is why I invited him to come on. That, plus I think his English accent is just very cool. So, Andre, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lou. Glad to be here.
So, okay, Andre, tell us a little bit where you're from. Obviously, your accent is not from South Jersey anywhere.
No, it's as you say, other side of the pond. I come from England. Been a Disney World visitor for many years. 1989, I think, was the first time that we went over there. As with all of us, fell in love with the place and been going back ever since. So I very quickly fell in love with Dixie Landings, as it was then, the original name for the Port Orleans Riverside Resort. And we've been staying there since 1995, pretty much every year since then. Obviously, coming from the other side of the ocean, it's more of an annual trip rather than the weekly research trip, which you might be able to make. Don't get the luxury of that. But as I said, we get over there about once a year, and I ended up, as we all seem to, spending so much time on the forums answering questions about what your favourite elements of Disney are and about the Port Orleans resorts, that I ended up thinking I really need to put all this lot down into a website as a resource to answer all these regular questions. So that's where the idea for PortOrleans.org came from. And the feedback seems to have been pretty good so far. People seem to think it serves its purpose. So hopefully there's some folks out there find it useful.
Absolutely. I mean, I have to say, it's beyond sort of just a fan website. It's sort of what I think now is sort of the de facto resource for anything about Port Orleans. And we're going to cover a lot of things that you have on that site there as well. And when we're done with the segment, I definitely recommend that people go and check it out, because it's a beautiful site. There's a lot to it, and very, very deep as far as information is concerned. But, let's talk about Port Orleans. I think you're going to agree with me that it's one of my favorite resorts, not just in the moderate category, but I think certainly definitely the best of the moderates in my opinion, but I think it's one of the best resorts on property. And we're going to talk a little bit later on about the resort itself and the rooms and the theming and maybe why we like it best. But I wanted to start off with a little bit of the history of the resort, because I think it has a very interesting background. It started off as one, then two that was one, then changed its name, and there's a lot to it. And it really sort of starts with the opening of Disney's Port Orleans Resort. That was its name when it opened on May 17th, 1991.
That's right. The resort, although has always run as a combined entity, the first segment of it that opened is the Port Orleans section, which is the section we now know as French Quarter. As you say, it opened in May 91 with just 3 buildings initially, which they quickly ramped up to the 7 buildings that we know now. And as a moderate resort, it's relatively small. There's just over 1,000 rooms, which compared to the other moderates is half the size, to be honest. And fairly soon after the opening of that section, a little bit further down the Sassagoula River, which is the man-made river that Disney put in to link between the Disney Village area and the new resort complexes. Further along that river, we had Dixie Landings Resort, which was twice the size of the original Port Orleans Resort. It runs to 2,048 rooms. But that was split into 2 sections. The Alligator Bayou section, which was actually the first part to be completed, and the Magnolia Bend section, which came a few months later. Roughly equal sizes, and each of those sections is the same size as the original Port Orleans Resort, and very different feel to them. The Alligator Bayou section is this kind of out in the backwater bayous, in the marsh areas, in the swamps, and the Magnolia Bend is the deep south mansion buildings, and a quite different feel, but set in the same era as far as the timing of the history and story of the resort.
Right, and like you said, and like we'll touch on a little bit later, I think that you really get almost 3 different experiences depending on where you stay at Port Orleans, whether it's French Quarter, Alligator Bayou, or Magnolia Bend. But you hinted to story, and I talk about on the show all the time how everything has a story, and not just an attraction or its queue, but restaurants and shows and probably restrooms do. And believe it or not, what a lot of people I think don't realize, Andre, is that Port Orleans has a very, very detailed and deep and long story that goes with it, and one that attaches itself sort of to French Quarter, obviously Port Orleans first, and then over to Dixie Landings. Tell us a little bit about some of that backstory.
Yeah, I mean, most of the backstory that I've sort of picked up from researching it revolves around the Dixie Landings portion of the resort. Basically, the whole concept is that the French Quarter portion, which is the original Port Orleans portion, it's complicated when you start talking about the original names and the new names, but the town of Port Orleans was set up first, and there were 2 brothers who lived there in the early 1800s. These brothers were Everett and Jonathan Colby, who was also known as Colonel J.C. It wasn't a real military name. He sort of picked it up as a nickname. These 2 brothers were living in the Port Orleans area, which was on the Sassagoula River, which out of interest, the Sassagoula River is named after the Mississippi. It's actually the original Native American term for Mississippi River. So along the Sassagoula River, anyway, Everett Peace, one of the two brothers, left according to the backstory, in 1835, and he moved up the river and settled on a small island that he'd found, building himself a secluded cabin where he intended to get away from the busy town life. The cabin that he built is now the Muddy Rivers Pool Bar, which is the area on the Old Man Island in Port Orleans Riverside, as we now know it, where the bar section is next to the pool. So, alongside this story, we have Colonel JC. He moved into a similar area, but by that time his brother had moved away and nobody knew where he was living. So in 1852, Colonel JC completed his mansion building, his Acadian house, which was named after his ancestors who came from Nova Scotia, which is also known as Acadia, which is where the term came from, and also where the term Cajun derives, in fact. So following on from that, the Colonel then set up his business operating in the area. So he set up a cotton mill, working the area, producing cotton, and that's the area that we now see as the Riverside Mill. All tying in around that, the riverboat started to ply the waters of the river. The Dixie Queen riverboat came along in 1855, and that was transporting people up and down the river, bringing prosperity to the Dixie Landings area. The riverboat, unfortunately, didn't last too long. It was struck by lightning, and the remaining timbers from the half of the riverboat which survived were then used to build the Boatwright's shipyard by a gentleman called Henry Lamarin. All sorts of other people are tied in with the story, and there's a lot more detail to this in the on the website. But to avoid this becoming a 3-hour show,
why should this week be any different than every other week?
As I said, if if you go through the whole detail, there's an entire newspaper full of it. But 1855 again, we have General George Fulton, who bought some land from the Colonel to open up a store in the area because it was becoming more prosperous, which is the store that we see at Riverside, the Fulton's General Store. And his wife, Amelia, set up the bar in the area for all the workers to go and drink when they were finished working, and that's the what was called the Cotton Co-op Bar, which is now the bar that we see in the main building at Port Orleans Riverside. The boatwright we mentioned earlier, Henry Lamarin, opened a boat building yard in 1877 for boat construction in the area. Again, interesting sort of detailing. If you look at the Boatwright's restaurant from the outside, from the dock area at the resort as it stands now, you can see the way that the architecture has been designed. There's a large door which is on metal rails at the top, which looks like it should be able to slide open to get the boats out from the construction yard, and even the dockside there has a drop bridge which they would be lowering to get the boats down onto the water. So every little detail has been followed through, right down, as I said, to the runner rails at the top of these massive doors that would have let the boats through. Tying in alongside this, obviously people were starting to move into the area, so each of the mansion buildings in the Magnolia Bend area has its own backstory. Briefly, we've already heard about the Acadian house, which was built by the Colonel. Magnolia Terrace was the next one, which was constructed by Buford Honeyworth III, who married the Colonel's daughter, Sarah, and they built their building, their mansion near to the Colonel's house. Another resident in the area, Tanner Franklin, moved into the area. He set up Oak Manor. He actually was Dixie Landing's first mayor and later became the senator for the area. And the last of the mansion buildings, Parterre Place, Edward Barron and his wife Betsy, who was a city girl who brought the city life to the area and made the place very much her own, according to this backstory. And alongside all of this, they then were building bridges between the different areas and constructing all the other little bits and pieces that you see, like the lodges that are in the Alligator Bayou section, and even those, as you look at them, there are 3 distinct construction styles which were meant to represent the various different eras and the building materials that were available to the workers as they were putting these houses together in the Alligator Bayou section. Briefly, then back with the 2 brothers, they finally were reunited. They were reunited because there was there's a little sculpture that the brother on the island, Everett, used to make. He gave to children who came over to the island who played in the water hole that he got there, and which of course became the swimming pool. And this got back to JC, Colonel JC, and he noticed the inscriptions on it and realised that this was his brother. So they were reunited, and the whole story came back full circle. And the bridges were built over to Old Man Island, and everybody got reunited. And that's, in a nutshell, the background story to the original concept of the resort. It's changed somewhat over the years, particularly with the change in naming. A lot of the backstory detail has been sort of reduced in importance, and some of the names that were in place have been changed, such as the references to the American Deep South, the cotton trade. Disney obviously had their concerns about some of the implications that were there. So references to the Cotton Co-op Bar, for example, is no longer referred to in the same way, and the cotton mill is now the Riverside Mill. So it's changed slightly, but that story is still there, and the way that everything was put together, you can trace back to this original story.
And this is just one of the things that I find so interesting and so fascinating, and this is why nobody does it like Disney does, because they built, like you said, such an intricate backstory. And again, I'll refer people over to your site where they can read through exactly how the story sort of plays out in even more detail. And there's, sketches and images and photos that they created to make this sort of, reality to associate itself. And again, like I said, we've seen it with attractions, you can understand it. But to build something so detailed into a resort, you almost would say, why would they do it? But, especially since I think, Andre, most guests never realized it, because the only place that you can really sort of see the story told to you was in the old Sassagoula Times. And now, you kind of have to look carefully, and everything sort of has, like we always say, there's a meaning and there's a reason and there's a story behind that every little detail that you see.
Indeed, yeah. As you say, Disney do this so much with the theme parks and the attractions. We've heard with Everest and so on, the more recent constructions, the amount of background story that's been put into this. But it goes back to the resorts. There are, as you've done other resorts as well. Wilderness Lodge, for example, has this fabulous backstory to it. And it brings just another level that you can enjoy the resort on. You can go in, you can stay in the room, you can go to the park, you can go home. But behind that, all these little details, like why it's a cotton mill, why there's a water wheel outside, why the Old Man Island is called Old Man Island. All these little details that on Old Man Island, the water features are a sort of an aqueduct that runs across the top, and the water pours down from it. That when you're swimming in the pool, you can swim underneath it. But this was part of the Everett Pieces when he was a recluse. His water system. It was filling up his water butt to keep his fresh water in. So all of this detailing, everything has a purpose. None of it is there just for random effect. There's a whole story to it, and it makes, as you say, it makes the difference between something that Disney does and something that another theme park would do.
Right, and you know what? If we were to end this segment right here, I would hope that people would be intrigued enough, especially if they like Port Orleans, that they should go and they should take the time to wander the grounds and explore and try and pick out some of these details, whether it be on Old Man Island, or back in the main building, or over at the River Roost, because now you'll be able to start picking up some of these other details and the significance, and maybe that light will go on and say, okay, now I see why this is there. This is why it looks the way it does, and really hopes to make you appreciate the resort so much more. But let's talk. You talked a little bit about the names changing and some of the other storylines changing. And that sort of ties into a physical change that kind of took place in the resort as well, because in March 1st of 2001, Dixie Landings and Port Orleans went through a bit of a transformation themselves. They were combined sort of in name into one large resort. You saw it starting to take place in road signage, and then officially on April 1st, they've merged to become the Port Orleans Resort with French Quarter and Riverside. And maybe we should talk a little about maybe why it happened and what that meant sort of to guests. Disney really never made the reasons clear. They did actually send out letters to guests in February 2001 explaining that there was going to be a change in name, not really the reason why. When you were talking about the story, there were dates associated with it in the mid-1850s, obviously right before the Civil War, during the days of slavery, and I think that's some of the reason, like you said, like the Cotton Co-op was named and it was renamed. The Colonel's Cotton Mill was renamed. Now it's called the Riverside Mill. Some of those other changes took place. What about as far as the resorts themselves? What kind of changes maybe would guests have seen from 2000 to 2001?
I think in practical terms, the changes were actually relatively transparent to guests. Unless the guests had gone and were fascinated by this whole backstory, you would find if you had visited a few years before, you would have received, as you said, the Sassagoula Times newspaper, which would have had pages and pages of this backstory. As time went on and we got towards the millennium and beyond, this became a smaller and smaller publication, down from an 8-page tabloid newspaper down to a simple fold-open 2-sheet document giving you the useful information you need to stay at the resort, where the food court is and what time it opens and all the other factual bits of information. So that kind of dwindled, and there was much less emphasis placed on it. The two resorts were always run under a common management. So even when they opened, because they're physically so close to each other, it's literally a 10-minute walk from one food court door to the other food court door. Although they appear to be quite separate. Again, the brilliance of Disney's theming is that you can have these two things which seem completely separate identities, but which are right on the doorstep of each other. And as I said, we're operated under a common management structure. So when they then merged the naming together, so that from the guest's point of view, these two resorts were both now known as Port Orleans French Quarter, Port Orleans Riverside. I think the main difference is it did introduce, certainly to start with, an element of confusion, because, and again, we know the reason why they wanted to do it, which was to remove the Dixie Landings, the pre-Civil War, the slavery aspects, all of that element which wasn't really fitting in with the way that Disney obviously wanted to do business. But why they decided to run them under the joint name of Port Orleans, nobody that I am aware of has ever come up with an explanation for why they didn't simply rename Dixie Landings to another name and still operate them as separate entities. As far as your check-in's concerned, as far as booking, as far as everything to do with the guest experience, you deal with the two resorts as separate entities, separate check-in desks, separate bell services, separate car parks, separate entrances. So guests treat them as separate entities, but with this same name linking the two of them. So it did introduce an element of confusion, but as the backstory became less important and dwindled, I think they just became sort of two sides of the same coin, if you like, by the end of the operation.
Right. And the other thing that we lost too, and it's always sad to see a restaurant go away, but we lost Bon for Meals, which was over in French Quarter, which was the only table service restaurant there now. And when we talk about French Quarter next, we'll see that there's only a food court there. And that unfortunately went away in 2000, right before the merger took place. So really the only sit-down place to eat in either of the two resorts, which I agree are still two very distinct resort destinations, is over in Riverside.
Yeah, because they're so close, it's not a big issue as far as guests getting to a full table service restaurant. But it is still a 10-minute walk to a different resort, and it's the only moderate now that doesn't have a table service restaurant. And again, because Riverside is so much bigger, there are a number of other features of French Quarter which you would expect perhaps to find at a moderate standard resort, which you have to go over to Riverside. Boat rental, for example, is at the Riverside Marina that you'd go over to, and a number of the other individual facilities that you may want to use, you would go over to Riverside. French Quarter has a swimming pool with slide. It has a hot tub. It has all the normal bell services, food court, and so on. But it doesn't have cycle rental, boat rental. Doesn't have carriage rides, although they run through Port Orleans French Quarter. The horse-drawn carriage ride that's run in the evenings is based at Riverside, so you have to go over to Riverside to pick up the carriage, and then you take your ride from there. Riverside also has, because of its size, has a number of quiet pools, which again is a feature of the other moderates, that there are quiet pools as well as the main pool. French Quarter, with its much more compact design, doesn't have quiet pools. To be honest, it probably doesn't need them. I've never heard people say that the main pool is far too crowded because of it, because it is, a significantly smaller resort. And a lot of people enjoy that for it, because whilst you miss out on a few facilities, your walks to the food court are shorter. Your walks to the bus stop are shorter. There are less crowds waiting for the bus. So there's a lot of pluses to French Quarter, and it's a lot of people regard it as their favourite moderate for those reasons, because it doesn't have the scale of the other moderates, which can sometimes be, particularly during the busy times of year, you can get very, very crowded. Right. French Quarter doesn't tend to get that.
And that's part of the reasons why I love French Quarter so much. I think it's so quaint, it's so intimate, it's so beautifully themed inside and out. That's what makes it one of my favorite resorts. And the fact that it is so small is a big draw for me. I know I'm happy that you pointed out some of the differences in the amenities between Port Orleans, French Quarter, and Riverside. But let's talk about French Quarter just a little bit. Like you said, there's about 1,000 rooms there. And let's talk a little about some of the detailing inside, because one of the first things that you notice when you go into the registration lobby is it's called the Port Orleans Mint. And again, me being sort of the detail and the geek that I am, I love the fact that it's sort of themed after sort of a commercial bank of the 1800s.
Yeah, indeed. As we said, the original concept back at the start of it was that Port Orleans was the busy town, was the market merchant town. So a lot of the things that you see there are more oriented towards a more commercial centre. The buildings for the accommodation are in straight streets, very much along the lines of New Orleans' French Quarter area, in much neater, more tidily constructed buildings rather than the rambling alligator bayou that we found over at the Dixie Landings Resort. And this whole concept was the difference between the two sections. One was meant to be the outpost, the less explored area, whereas French Quarter was the bigger town-like section of the resort. And as you say, there's so much extra little details and fun stuff. Like I presume behind the registration desk there are musical notes, and those notes actually are the song "When the Saints Go Marching In." So this, again, you don't need to know that, but it just makes it that little bit extra to your experience if you're aware of all these things that have been put into the background of the story. Right.
And then when you go, impress your family and friends and say, "Do you know what that musical note behind the registration desk is?" And they'll either look at you and smile or look at you and laugh, as people normally do when I say it to them. But
or look at you in despair. Yes.
Right. Say, "Oh, you know what, Lou,
and say, only you would know that."
Just go ride the rides. I get that a lot. But you mentioned sort of that kind of hub and spoke layout where the courtyard sort of serves as a central point around which everything else emanates. Let's talk about some of, or maybe our recommended rooms or things that people should look for if they're going to go there and want a specific type of room. The buildings that I like most over at French Quarter would probably be 5 and 2, respectively. And then I'd say 3 or 4. And I say 5 and 2 first because they are not only close to the main building, but they're also the closest ones to the pool area, and then not very far away, and even a little bit closer, buildings 4 and 3 are closer to things like the food court, and obviously dining is very important. So
it does come into it, doesn't it?
But when I say close, I mean we're talking a matter of
we're talking yards.
You're right,
yeah.
10 yards, 20 yards. I mean, it's a very, very compact, very quaint little area.
I mean, there are 7 buildings within the French Quarter section. They've each got 144 rooms, and it's split into a north and south quarter. The southern area is buildings 1, 2, and 3, with building 1 furthest away down on the riverside, and the building 3 is getting a little bit closer, perhaps more towards the car park section. And as you say, building 2 is right up close next to the swimming pool and the facilities building. And then the north quarter is the other 4 buildings, and it kind of mirrors what we've seen in the south area. So building 5 next to the pool. Some parts of it are facing out over to the river, so you can get some lovely views sort of out on the river views there. Building 4, as you said, is quite a favourite of a lot of people because that gives you the best of almost all options. It's the closest to the bus stop. It's close to the swimming pool. It's definitely the closest as far as the food court and shop and so on is concerned. So that's a real favourite. And then 6 and 7, you go a little further out. 6 sort of is kind of the equivalent of building 1 at the other end of the resort, and then 7 is just 1 extra further on. And if you want a bit of peace and quiet and be away from the central hubbub, then building 7 would be the one to choose. But to be honest, both with French Quarter and Riverside, although these resorts have thousands of people staying there, I think you'll agree it never feels like it. Because of the way that it's constructed in these separate small clumps, any individual building has not got masses of people coming in and out of it. And you can step a few yards away from the main facilities buildings and feel that you're in a private little resort of 144 rooms. Right. Or in Riverside's case, even smaller. The Alligator Bayou section is 64 rooms per building. And it gives this lovely peaceful air to it, which perhaps you don't get even from the deluxes, because they're more centralised and the buildings are have all the rooms within one area. You tend to find that the lobby becomes congested as people are going in and out and through the lobby all the time. That doesn't happen with either with French Quarter or with Riverside.
Right, and with specifically, I see and I sort of get that intimate feeling. Believe it or not, when I'm in the main building, if you go to some place like the Scat Cat Club, or even the Sassagoula Floatworks, which is the food court, it's relatively very small. So, if you sit in the lounge, where there's jazz entertainment at night, you really get. I mean, it's very, very small, and I mean that sort of in a good way because it's not that sort of overcrowded. So, if you want to kind of get away, just relax, sort of unwind, the Scat Cat Club is a great place at the end of the night. And again, you are literally steps away from your room. Sassagoula Floatworks and Food Factory, it is a food court. It's got a great sort of Mardi Gras theme. There's a lot of huge sort of Mardi Gras parade float heads in there. Of course, it has the famous New Orleans beignets. Translated, it's fried dough with powdered sugar. How could you possibly go wrong?
You can't go wrong, can you? All it needs is chocolate, and it would be perfect. But yeah, that's as you say, it's regarded as one of the delicacies, and everybody that goes to French Quarter is required to try one of those.
And I think you can have it for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. I don't think that there's really any sort of restriction.
Dinner. What's this or? But yeah, the food court is much the same, I guess, in most respects as the other food courts you see around the moderates. It's laid out with a series of different serving hatches and so on, a bakery area and a section doing pizzas, for example, and burgers and whatever. But there is, as with all of them, a flavour to the resort. So you get the New Orleans concept and some of the flavouring of the food and the choices that you get. But it's still basically you pick it up from the counter, take it back to your table to eat with your bayonets, as you say.
Right, and you can get some. Let's be clear. You can get some New Orleans style food as well. They do have jambalaya. I think they have muffalata sandwiches there all the time too. Yep. Seafood Creole, a lot of things like that. So they definitely sort of infuse that New Orleans Cajun flavor into the food.
Indeed, yeah, very much so. But with the as we said before, as far as Disney restaurants are concerned, that they don't push it too far. You're not going to find it as an absolutely authentic New Orleans cuisine. It's going to be a Disney representation of it that will appeal to a wider palette. So people don't need to be afraid that they're going to go in there and there's nothing that they'll like to eat. There's plenty of options. You can stick with your a straightforward cheeseburger if you want to, or you can go for the more varied options. There is something for everyone.
Right. Although I would like to see maybe some shrimp po' boys or a bucket of crawfish on the menu. It would be nice. But let's move over to Riverside again. Very, very
take a little 10-minute walk up the river.
Exactly. If even 10 minutes, a fast walk if you're really hungry. So we're going away from the Mardi Gras of New Orleans Square, so the Jackson Square area, to the antebellum South along the Mississippi. It's a much larger resort. And again, you talked about the distinction between Alligator Bayou being a very sort of woodsy feel to the Magnolia Bend mansions and the stories behind that. Do you have a preference? Is there one that you like to stay in more than the other?
It divides people, to be honest. My own preference is Alligator Bayou. It has the same kind of feel to it as somewhere like Wilderness Lodge, for example, which is that little bit, as you say, in the bayou with twisty-turny pathways and streams and lush vegetation, and these smaller buildings, smaller, in comparison.
Right.
They're still
two-story.
64 rooms. They're two-story
small
buildings, no elevators. They're much smaller buildings. And even the interior of the rooms is themed in a more basic fashion. It's sometimes it's a bit difficult to describe because the mansion buildings are just that. They're designed to be a bit posher, basically. They have that Song of the South mansion building sort of feel to them. It could have come straight out of. Do you know why am I blanking on that film, Gone with the Wind?
If it's not a Disney movie, I know. You're like me. I don't even know what it is.
It's nothing to do with Disney. They kind of made that one. Yeah. So it has that kind of feel to it with manicured lawns and sweeping staircases and 3 stories in the centre of the buildings and these extension arms off to the sides of the buildings. They do have elevators there. They do, incidentally, at French Quarter as well, because their buildings are 3-story as well. But it's quite a different feel. And some people prefer that feel because the interior of the rooms, when you go in there, everything is much more ornate and floral patterns and designed to look like the rooms would be in a mansion building, as opposed to the Alligator Bayou, which, as I said, happens to be my preference, where the rooms have got this backwater sort of feel to them. The beds are carved. In fact, they are actually carved out of solid blocks of tree trunks and so on that make up the bedposts. The frames around the mirrors are all wood hewn as well. So you get this very, very different feel. The actual amenities, this is Disney, are the same. You're going to have your 2 double beds. You're going to have two wash sinks. You're going to have bath and shower. You're going to have television. You're going to have a fridge. You're going to have air conditioning. So the actual things that you will find within the rooms are the same. It's just the way that the decor and the design of them has been altered between the different themed sections. Right. I hear just as many people on the site who adore the mansion buildings, who prefer to stay there because of the feel of that Song of the South, Gone with the Wind sort of feel to it. And just as many people like the Alligator Bayou. The Alligator Bayou does have one other plus to it, I guess. It's the one that starts closest to the main food court, and one of the downsides with Port Orleans Riverside is, as we said, it's big. And if you get in one of the far-flung buildings of Alligator Bayou, if you get in building 24 or 36, for example, these are a good walk away from the main building. You could perhaps have a 10-minute walk in the morning to go and get your breakfast, and then 10 minutes back to your room again. So there is a downside to it, but if you're staying in one of the buildings close to the food court area, location is perfect. You've got a quiet pool next to you. The woodsy feel to it is fabulous. The amount of wildlife that you get just in the vegetation around is fantastic. Thankfully, few alligators, but you do get your bunny rabbits and frogs and lizards and all the other things sort of running around in the wildlife, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I think I definitely prefer Alligator Bayou. I like, again, that small, sort of more intimate feel. I do like Magnolia Bend. You talk about walking, and because the buildings are very, very large, depending on where you are, you might be like a 20-minute walk from your car. If you're on the opposite side, if you have maybe a water view, it can be a bit of a long walk, and I only say that because I know at the end of the night with the strollers and the diaper bags and the babies and the kids that are sleeping and the souvenirs, sometimes I'm like, you know what, I'll forego the water view, just get me close to the parking lot so I can get back.
I think the walk is about 20 minutes at night,
right?
with kids. I think it's shorter during the day, but yeah, you're right. At night, it's definitely 20 minutes. They expand the resort at night, I think, after you get back from the park.
That's right. And for people, again, who are curious, maybe, which buildings are closest to the pool areas. Alligator Bayou, buildings 27 or 38. Magnolia Terrace on the mansion side is definitely a quick walk over one of those bridges over to Old Man Island. If you want to be close to a bus stop, Alligator Bayou, buildings 14 or 15, right there, again, also closest to the food court. And again, let's talk a little about the dining as long as we're back there. Listen, I have to.
Oh, dining.
Yeah, well,
why not?
There's a number of options over at Riverside. There's obviously the River Roost Lounge, which is a great place I love to go at the end of the night, even if I'm not staying there. And we've done a segment on the show before about Yeehaw Bob.
Yeehaw Bob, yeah.
He is reason enough to go and visit. I think a wonderful evening is going to Boatwright's for dinner, hanging out, and going to the River Roost Lounge with your family. It is family-friendly show from Yeehaw Bob Jackson.
Yeah, definitely. People, as you say, will visit Riverside specifically to go and see one of his shows. He performs most nights. I think it's Wednesday through to Saturday. There is also a performance that we shouldn't leave out French Quarter. Elliot Dyson performs a jazz session same nights over at French Quarter. But Yeehaw Bob has got a reputation now amongst the internet community. He does this fabulous piano comedy shtick act, getting everybody joining in with him. As you say, it's very family friendly. People don't need to think of it as this is a bar that we're going into. It's more of a lounge. It's in a Disney resort. It's in part of the thoroughfare between the main lobby area and the restaurant section, so there is no problem at all in taking the family there, and Bob will probably remember every single one of you as well. It's a fabulous memory for all the people who he talks to during his act.
Absolutely. Riverside Mill is the food court, a little bit relatively pedestrian. I think it's not even as quote unquote exotic maybe as the food court that you get over in French Quarter.
Yeah.
They do have, pizza. They have a create-your-own pasta station, a few other things. But I think if you're going to be staying at Riverside, you can't recommend enough going to eat over in Boatwright's, which, like we said, is the only table service restaurant. And even breakfast here. I mean, they even have the food here at breakfast is
French toast.
Well, there you go. You see that? For dinner, jambalaya. You can't beat that kind of stuff. And I love Boatwright's, and I've made specific trips over there just to eat. Surprise, surprise, for breakfast.
Yeah, again, the Boatwright's area, it's set up as this shipyard. You've got this half-constructed, massive ship, wooden constructed boat that is the length of the whole restaurant above everybody's heads. Around the walls, you've got all the tools hanging on the walls that would be from the boat builders. Who it feels like they've just left and somebody set up a restaurant in this boatyard. Even your condiments and in the center of the table are in a worker's toolbox. Fabulous design and theming to tie in with the rest of the resort. And I say great, especially for breakfast. You can get some wonderful choices. The website's got all the menu options, but I'm sure you can list them one by one.
Let me just throw this out there for you. And just close your eyes, folks, unless you're driving, and picture this. Banana stuffed French toast with strawberry banana sauce with your choice of bacon, sausage, or ham. I challenge you, Tonga toast, with a banana stuffed French toast from Boatwright's. It's exceptional.
Yeah, and you haven't even got any of this in front of you. This is from memory.
That's right. Yeah, and again, I'm going to refer people over to your site because look through the breakfast menu and all of a sudden you might not think I'm as crazy as you think I am for going over there just to have breakfast.
Yeah, it's great. As you say, the food court is fine for just a quick drop in and eat. It's big. We've been back to this 2,000 room resort. It's got to be big, and it can get congested. And the food is slightly more basic, but you've got plenty of options there. You've got some slightly Cajun theme to it, but it's more basic in the food that it offers. But then, as you say, boat rides.
So now that you've done nothing but sit at boat rides and eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner there, maybe you don't want to go to the parks. And Andre, you touched on a lot of the amenities that both the resorts have. There's something else that I think is just so nice and so quaint about this. You could just get a cane pole and go fishing over by Old Man Island. $4 for a half hour. The whole family can do it. They even have a family package. You want to talk about just a nice sort of afternoon to spend with people, spend with your family or friends, a nice kind of escape. I think that's it's some of those quaint things like that and the carriage rides that I love about these resorts.
Yeah. Again, they tie it partly in with the theming, but Riverside, I think, has probably got one of the widest selection, I guess, of facilities. You've got the fishing hole, which is nothing, in terms of Disney costings. It's nothing. You can go and spend a few hours there with the kids, catch a few fish. It's catch and release. So you're not going to be taking your catch back to the restaurant to cook it that evening. But it's something that's a little bit different. You get the people who go to Disney World, and as far as they're concerned, they're going to a theme park, and they come out of the theme park, and then that's the end of their day. When you're staying at somewhere like Riverside, there is so much more. You've got the fishing. You've got the campfire on Campfire under Bayou, which is it's seasonal. It's during the winter months, and it's campfire. You can sit around. You can roast your s'mores on it. Hear stories being told by the cast members. You've got boat rental. You've got a whole variety of different types of boats. Now, again, you can rent boats at some of the other moderate resorts, but these boats you can take all the way down to downtown Disney. You can go right down the river particularly on the smaller ones. There are certain restrictions as to how far you can go with some of the boat types, but you can take the boat over to Old Key West, for example. You can take the boat down to downtown Disney, and these are rentable by the half hour or by the hour. Again, not ludicrous pricing by the prices that you pay for some of the things in Disney. You can rent bicycles. You can rent the Surrey bikes, the four-seater, four-wheel bikes that you steer with a steering wheel. You can take those around the resort. It's not as flat as it looks, just to warn people.
You need to work off that French toast. So
yeah, that's it. Yeah, but I heard one or two people who said that's not as flat as it appeared to be when I set out. But you've got so many different things that you can do. The kids have got a games arcade there. It's probably one of the better ones on property, to be honest. The arcade at Riverside. French Quarter has another one of its own, slightly smaller. But you've got so many of these facilities that you don't have to be in the theme parks. You've got 6 swimming pools in the one resort, and then another one over at French Quarter, which has slides, and a kiddie play area, a hot tub. So whilst it's not Snomalong Bay, it's perfectly fine for you to spend time back at your resort and swimming.
Absolutely, and I think you can. I think you can spend a full day here, which is why, to one of my last points. I think if you like the value resorts and you normally stay at the value resorts, you really should consider, if you can, trying to stay at one of the Port Orleans resorts. I think it is so worth the extra money if you can afford to do it. The rooms are bigger. There's so many more amenities. The location is great. Like I said, right by downtown Disney. Standard rack rates, you're looking at a difference about $149 for a moderate like Port Orleans, about $89 for a value resort. Andre, I assume you agree with me that if you're able to do it, maybe splurge just a little bit, you'd be very, very impressed at what you get at either or both of these resorts. Yeah,
you get so much more for that little extra bit of money that you pay. Particularly, you get a completely different environment in the way that the resort has been designed and themed, and the waterway and the islands and the vegetation and so on. The value resorts tend to be bright and brash and traditional, in quotes, Disney. You've got big Disney characters in them. You've got it's mostly concrete. There's very little vegetation there. It's very, very in your face Disney. Whereas you go to the Port Orleans resorts and you could walk around for half a day and not realize that you were within Walt Disney World. The gift shop obviously has its share of Mickey Mouse, but apart from that, you don't feel Disney being pressured upon you. You feel the theme of the resort being put on you, which is, after all, what theming is meant to be about. It's not meant to say I'm in Disney World. It's meant to say I'm in the Deep South, in New Orleans, on the Mississippi River, wherever the particular theme is meant to say. And that's one of the things that's so nice about these. As you move up from the values, you become a completely different, in a completely different theme and environment.
Exactly. And like you said before, it's along the same line as the experience that you get at some of the deluxe resorts, like Wilderness Lodge. You feel like you're in the Pacific Northwest. In Animal Kingdom Lodge, you feel like you are on a real savannah. And I think that's what you get here at both French Quarter and at Riverside. So there is much, much more. I'm going to, again, direct you listeners to go over to portorleans.org. I'll also put a link in the show notes to Disney's official Port Orleans pages on their website for more information. Andre, thank you again so much for coming on and joining me. I owe you a drink at River Roost with some Yeehaw Bob next time you're in town.
Well, we'll stick to that. Thank you. Thanks for asking me.
And, of course, breakfast over at both.
Yeah, toast.
Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate it.
Food came back in.
You have to. You got to start off and end off with food, as always. So, cheers, my friend. Thank you again.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have this week. Thanks very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks also to Andre Willie for joining me this week. His site is portorleans.org, and I encourage you to visit. There's a lot more there about the resorts that we didn't even get to cover in this segment. Also, Andre asked that if anybody wants to help him with the research into the Port Orleans French Quarter side of the backstory, and or if anybody has any of the early Sassagoula Times issues from the original Port Orleans, so if he can see if there's more story there, please email him at admin@portorleans.org or go ahead and go visit his site. Again, that's portorleans.org. Thanks to everybody who called in this week and emailed the show. Speaking of emails, I promise to get to your emails soon. I'm sorry that I have not gotten a chance to do your emails on the show. I promise they are coming in the next few weeks. Also, I apologize that there was no news this week. I did have to record and produce the show very, very early on because I was leaving to go down to Walt Disney World for Mouse Fest, but I promise as soon as I come back, we'll pick up the news once again. Last couple of quick reminders. Don't forget that my 2009 Walt Disney World Trivia page-a-day calendar is still available on sale at the shop at DisneyWorldTrivia.com. It is just $7. There's only a limited supply of these left, so once they are gone, they're gone. They make great holiday gifts and stocking stuffers. Again, you can pick those up, as well as my books and CDs at DisneyWorldTrivia.com. You can also subscribe to or get back issues of Celebrations magazine over at celebrationspress.com. Issue 2 is out, and if you're a subscriber, it should be arriving in your inbox any day. If not, if you want to check it out, you can order individual issues or subscribe right from the website. And hey, if you want to contribute to the magazine, whether it's a photo, a story, a letter to the editor, or even an article suggestion, by all means, please email me. And speaking of emails, if you have a question that you want read on the air, you can email me at lou@wdwradio.com. Or if you want to be on the air yourself, you can call the new toll-free voicemail line at 1-888-703-2171. You know I love hearing from you, whether it's a question, a comment, and especially when you guys call in from the parks. Also, be sure and come by and friend me up over on Facebook. It's free to join. And we also have fan groups for the show as well as Celebrations Magazine. You can find direct links to the groups as well as to my profile page in this week's show notes. Also, if you're not following me on Twitter, go to twitter.com/Lou Mongello. I post updates there all the time. You can get them sent via email on your cell phone or from the Twitter website. When I'm down in the parks, I also love playing these Where in the World games, where I'll take pictures of something or someplace in Walt Disney World, ask you guys to identify exactly where I am. It's a lot of fun, and again, too, Twitter is free as well. Please be sure and stay tuned over the next couple of weeks. I've got some exciting things coming up for the show, some exciting segments I'm really looking forward to. And if you're a new listener, please go back, check out some of the old shows. You can find them right in the show directory from the WDW Radio Show website. Finally, I want to ask you again, we're approaching show 100. I'm asking for your help to try and reach 100% of our fundraising goal for the Dream Team project. We're about $42,000 now, trying to reach $45,000, so we're really, really close by show 100. We're down to our last 3 shows. So again, anything you guys can do, all that money goes through First Giving right to the Make-A-Wish Foundation of America. And finally, to comment on, talk about the show, please come by the forums at DisneyWorldTrivia.com. There's a WDW Radio Show forum right in there. There's also lots of different discussions going on. There's more than 30,000 members in our very fun, very friendly community. So I invite you to come by and please say hi. And of course, if you like the show, please help spread the word. Let other people know about it whenever and wherever you can. And of course, everybody, thanks so much for joining me this week. I really do appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoyed the show once again. I have a blast doing this each and every week for you and with you. I consider myself so fortunate to be able to share something that I love and am so passionate about with you guys each and every week. So thank you once again. Hope you guys have a fantastic week this week. Remember to always keep moving forward. So until next time, I'll see ya. And last, but certainly not least, big happy birthday goes out to my wife, Deanna. Happy 29th birthday. Again, thank you for being who you are and for being so supportive. I could never do this show each and every week without your support, and the world is a better place because you're in it. So happy birthday to you.
Hi, Leo. This is Marissa from Mocksville, North Carolina. My husband, Chris, and I are in Disney World right now. We checked into Pop Century yesterday. We've had a great time so far. The weather has been spectacular. The parks have been a little bit more crowded than we were expecting, but the lines were very manageable. I just finished dinner with the family at Boma and enjoyed one of my favorite dishes that the world has to offer, which is the chicken and corn porridge. And we still have 3 more days left, so I just wanted to check in and tell you we're having a great time utilizing a lot of the tips we've gotten from your show. And sorry that we're here this week and not next week when Mouse Fest is going on. Would have loved to have gone to some of the meets, but there's always next year. But that's it for now. So long. Thanks, Lou.
Hi, Lou. This is Chad from the Bronx. Fun to be free on the forums and one of your Facebook friends. I'll try not to be long-winded. It's a 2-parter. One is that just heard episode 92, and I heard a little thing that you said about dropping your rental car off at the Alamo Car Care Center and not knowing how to get anywhere from there. Just in case you didn't know or listeners didn't know, that they have a shuttle there that will take you anywhere in the property if you need to. I ran into this when I was bringing my national rent-a-car, which also you can drop there. I was coming in late Saturday night after it closed, and I didn't know what to do Sunday morning with the car. I wanted to get rid of it as soon as possible, but I also wanted to get to the parks, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I found out that they will take you wherever you want. So we had our breakfast at the Wilderness Lodge, brought the car over right to the Car Care Center, and the shuttle took me and my family straight to the front door at Epcot, and it was a great way to start the day. We might have even beat the bus if we would have taken the bus that way, just to let you know that. Number 2 is I've been listening to your program for almost a year now. I just got into the Disney Online and Disney Podcast community last December when I got my iPod for a gift. And I just wanted to let you know, listening back to some of your old shows, there is a little bit of bittersweetness that I've been hearing. I am a big-time, old-time Epcot fan. I went to Epcot yearly in the 80s, starting from February 83, when Epcot was just a baby. And I truly miss those old days. And listening to the celebration 25 years back in October of last year, I really wish I could have been a part of that. Your shows were terrific, It's great to listen to all of that. My all-time favorite show of yours is the interview of the old Dreamfinder. But there is always a tinge in my conscience, a little pain in my chest when I feel like I really should have been there. And that was the taste of old Epcot that I probably will never get to see again. But your show was the closest thing that I had, and I appreciate all of those shows around October of 2007, all leading up to that, and your accounts of what happened at the actual celebration. Wanted to thank you for that, and want to thank you for everything that you do, especially anything old Epcot, and just keep that one little spark. Thanks a lot, Lou. I'll see ya.
Hi, Lou. This is Ariel from New Jersey. Just wanted to say that I am calling from the Magic Kingdom right now, and I'm having the time of my life. And I told my family about how wonderful Pecos Bill was since you told us about it, and we're eating here right now. And let me tell you, that was the best burger I've ever had in my entire life. Well, keep up the good work, and keep us updated with everything. Okay, bye.
Hey Lou, this is John Beal from Zionsville, Indiana, calling once again, saying that I just happened to sign up for the mini marathon just now, and I was a bit hesitant to do it, but I was like, you know what, Lou Mongello did the mini marathon, so you know what, maybe I'll do it. So he inspired me. So unfortunately, it's not in Disney World, but it's in Indianapolis, and it's definitely going to be pretty intense, but you know what? You did it, so I think I can do it too. All right, bye.
Hey Lou, this is Lou. I'm calling from Walt Disney World. I'm at the O Canada Pavilion, the 360 presentation, and just want to let you know that the attraction is working, but the falls are not. The falls out front are dry. They're doing a little bit of maintenance on them and getting caught up on that. So just want to let you know, having fun. It is December 3rd. Talk to you later. Bye.
On behalf of our entire flight crew, thanks for soaring with us.